Dun. I'm going to be coffee and hacky today.
Still haven't fully ditched the illness.
Yeah, it's like my lungs are not. They feel like they're clear now, not like golf balls rolling around in there somewhere. Like that weird feeling that you have when there's something there you just can't quite hack it up. So that's gone, but like there's still a little cough, and I hope I'm not getting re sick. Like like oh, you thought you were over it? Well, here's round two. It's just like
Yeah. Oh, I've had those loops before. It sucks.
so yeah. Anyway, here we are in vintage engineering again. I should go to Vintage Story. Development. Dev stream has started. Just in case anybody around there. You never know. Never know. Kind of in before the storm here. Because next week is going to be kind of crazy. In terms of mods and games, and like we've gone months and months without really any major releases, and suddenly we're going to get 2 in a month. It's kind of crazy. And Oz, I should mention, I don't think I've told you yet. I was doing some year end things, and I noticed that Tyrone he's not a patron anymore.
Oh, shoot.
He signed out in November, right at the end of November. So, and I didn't get an email. Like, usually I get emails for that stuff, and Patreon was like, no, you're not even getting notified of that shit.
Weird.
So I was sad. I was sad to see that. I don't know why. There was no indication. I've gave him a message and said, hey, just it's fine, but it's your thing. But I just was wondering why. Because anyway, so that one hurt a little bit. Plus, it was good motivation knowing the developer of the game was behind, like, supporting the project. That was great motivation to finish Vintage Engineering, because it was like almost like a tiny little sticker, right? It was like one of those little smiley face stickers that teachers put on your things. It was a little sticker that said, "Hey, I approve," and I like that. Okay. So this code here, I completely to fix the bug for buckets. I completely had to refactor this call, but because it looked like the base game, they've recoded it. I don't remember a lot of this stuff in the base game when I first coded this functionality, and so I went through and I recoded the whole function to interact with buckets in the same way that you interact with them in the base game with like barrels. So it was trial and error, and the biggest difference, the reason why it wasn't a 1-to-1 with the base game is the base game, for some reason, when it comes to fluids and fluid interactions, they're all piped through the block versus the block entity. Now, the block, when you do that, all the block does is it then calls the block entity to see, like, hey, what's in this? What, like, how much is in this? That's still has to be piped through the block entity or attributes. And that's the big one, is they use attributes, but I don't fully understand how or why the fluids are done that way. And everything else is done through a block entity. I don't know why fluids have to be separate. There's no documentation on any of this stuff. So it's like, I don't know why fluids are treated special over, normal inventory, which is all block entity side. So for my tanks, the tanks are block entities, right? The tank deals with its inventory in the block entity, and so all of the calls and all of that has to kind of pipe through the block entity, and that's why I had to refactor all of this. And it's not a direct cookie cutter from the base game, because all the base game calls of, like, try to take content, get content, set content, all of those calls are called on the block. And my block for my tank doesn't have any of those calls, or it doesn't really support those calls, because I still could not figure out why the block does all of the interactions with fluids. Because it like, when you actually look at the code for, like, get content, for the fluid container, all it's doing is grabbing the block entity and then returning, like, block entity data. So why is that in the block when it's interacting with the block entity anyway? It doesn't make any sense. It's like you're adding a middleman step that, yeah, it shouldn't. You're just adding an extra step to the stack, and whatever. It is what it is. I fixed it. It works. It's all good. At least it works for the test case that I used it in with a stack of buckets. I'm sure that there's a weird edge case that somebody's gonna mod in a weird bucket or something, and it's gonna break in some way, and then whatever. Don't do that. So anyway, the multi-block system, as you know, I kind of took December off, but I did fix 1.21.6. Like, I did fix that bug and put out a quick new release just before Christmas, because. And I messaged Tyrone about this in December, which is funny because he had already signed off on Patreon and I didn't know it. But I messaged him in December about the problem, because usually API changes are limited to, like, major releases. So when, like, 1.21 came out, right, that release, 121.0, that release is usually, like, for modders, the release of, like, okay, this is going to have all the API changes. So once that goes stable, grab a new version of the game, update all of your code for 1.21, and then it's usually good for all of the minor versions for 1.21, right? By, like, all previous versions of the game that I've modded, that has been the case. That 1.21 or 1.x comes out, you update everything, any API changes, which sometimes there's not, and it works across the board. But sometimes there is, and so you update everything, and then 1.21.1, .2, .3, .4 doesn't matter, right? Their API changes are locked in. Those versions are just bug fix changes, usually limited to JSON and other edge cases. But usually there's not a big API change. However, In 121.6, there was a single bug fix line in the changelog about food spoilage when you had a ground storable, right? So let's say you used the ground storable mechanics where you shift right click and you store stuff on the ground. The way that actually works is it creates like a little chest, like an invisible chest on the ground. And that's how that works, is it actually creates like a chest. And then it stores the stuff in that chest, and that's the ground storable. It's kind of a hack, but that's how that works. Well, if you do that with food, and that food rots, right, and spoils, what happens to the item? And there's a line item that fixes that fixed food spoilage disappearing during a ground storable, right? The actual fix for that, whoever coded that fix, and I know Tyrone is not the one to do it, right? Because he's got a team now. Whoever coded that fix changed, in order to fix that, they actually changed one of the fundamental base API interfaces for block entity container, iBlock entity container, right? This container interface is a fundamental interface in the API, and all block entity containers have it, right? So it's a extremely low level, mass used interface, and they added a line, they added a function to that, which was for something spoiling between ticks or something like that. I don't remember why they did it the way they did it, but anyway, they changed. The important thing is they changed the interface. And when you change an interface, everything that relies on that interface, anything that calls that interface or uses that interface in any tree structure, right? I could have an object that's an object and an object, but that object has an interface. Well, what happens is the game, if you try to run the mod or whatever that uses that interface and it runs it, well, the footprint, right? The footprint is not going to match the signature of your interface implementation, does not match the signature now of the updated interface. So the updated interface has a different, let's call it a checksum, right? It has a different pattern. And the compiler, when it runs your code, is trying to match what you have in your code to what the game has. And because that interface changed, that is not copacetic. It's not loading that object properly because it's a different pattern. It doesn't know how to really resolve when it's a completely different pattern. Is because it's like, is this a different object? Is it possibly like, and so when people tried to run the mod in 121.6 before I updated, it was corrupting every machine because every machine has an inventory. Every machine is a block entity container. And so it was not able to properly load that data back into memory because the objects were not matching. Right? And it's just foobarred the whole thing. And so that then cascaded down to every facet of the mod because pipe extraction nodes, those are block entity containers, right? So that has the interface. So all the pipe extraction nodes all corrupted, which corrupted all of the pipe networks. The whole thing got just foobarred. The whole mod got foobarred because of that one change to one interface. That was one of the most low-level things in the game, right? Block entity container. There's a lot of those. And so I thought that was weird that level of an API change was done in a minor update, 121.6. Didn't happen in 5.5, but 6, boom, you have this API change, which would have done the same thing to any mod that used that interface. Any mod out there that utilized that interface would have had the same result. It would have foobarred the mod because you're not able to match data to memory, and it's just kind of blah. It's just, yeah, I didn't like it. So I messaged Tyrone about it once I figured out everything. Like, once I figured out why, I figured out what it was. I messaged Tyrone and said, I don't know who did this code, but this is a fundamental API change in a minor version like this, where there was no the problem for me. Like, change your code however you want. Like, I don't care. Fix bugs however you want. The biggest problem for me was there was no indication in the change log at all that a fundamental API change was made, right? There was no warning to the version. It was, they put out 121.6 and here you go. And it broke probably dozens of mods, like fundamentally foobarred dozens of mods. Where there was no indication in the changelog that was going to happen. And that was my biggest issue. Was when I read through the changelog, I was like, I don't know why people reporting the mod was broken. And I'm like, nothing in the changelog shows an API change. Nothing in the changelog showed like something drastic would have happened. And yet it was kind of sneaky. It was in there, but nobody had said fundamental API, like API changes, iBlock entity container, pattern change or whatever, changed and added this function call, recompile, blah blah blah, or don't update don't update your games until you have mods that update, right? Because it's like, when that changes, when you fundamentally change an API like that, it's going to break out with all the things. It's going to break everything that uses that. And that wasn't a obscure interface that not very many things use. That was a block entity container. That was fundamental to all the things. So anyway, that was a crazy. So yeah, I had to get the new version of the game, load it up, figure out why it was causing it in the first place, and then I added just references to that new function call. I don't even know all the places that I had to put it, but there were a few. So that was the fun, like a rundown of what that bug was and why 21.6 broke all the things. And so anybody out there that had some growing pains or some issues with 21.6, that's why, was that very fundamental call. And I messaged Tyrone about it, and he was apologetic and stuff. I was like, I'm not telling you this to come down on you. I'm just saying you're usually like phenomenally good at limiting your API changes in minor versions. This was an outlier, and I'm just letting you know that this happened, so you can, work on it internally and get that messaging internally and say, hey, don't do this, to your other coders, because that's not how you roll. Okay. So, I don't know where I left off in terms of let's see. Walk blocks. So yeah, this is a algorithm to look for the core if block position. There's the core. Okay. Core position. Okay. The problem is the incomplete. There are myriad edge case possible bugs, right? What happens if you build two multi-blocks next to one another at the same time? When you place the interaction block, it might possibly maybe find the wrong core. So how do you mitigate that? And if anybody has any questions regarding modding in general, modding the game, the code I'm looking at, like if you have any questions, let me know. It's far easier to answer questions on modding when I'm doing this, and I can pull code up and I can show actual examples of code and stuff like that. It's so much easier to answer modding questions when I can actually outline exactly what I'm looking at. Or I can pull up DN Spy and I can show like base game, like here's the code in the base game, like this is what you look at. Like I can answer questions that way as well. It doesn't even have to be related to vintage engineering. It's just, hey, if you have a modding question, it's kind of what I do. So, you know, it is what it is. And if you want to support the project, if you want to, you know, help in any way, there's channel membership or become a patron and just be like, throw me a couple bucks a month, and every little bit of support is very, very appreciated and very, very helpful. So this takes a long time to do it right, or at least I may not claim to do it right, but at least do it in a way that will allow for maximum, expendability and stuff down the road. So there's a way to sort of hack away at it, and there's a way to kind of make it work. Okay, so the interactable. So we have a quick summary of the multi-block system as I'm building it. Is sort of a hybrid system based on like immersive engineering. Anybody who's played that, where the blocks that you place for the multi-block are components. So you have scaffolding blocks, you have fence blocks, you've got generic blocks that you're building the structure out of, right? That's where the cost of the multi-block comes in. Is the cost of those input ingredients. Well, I'm also including IO blocks, specific blocks that indicate where interaction of any kind happens, right? And where like power connection is, where pipe connections are, where fluids connections are, stuff like that. I have these interactable or IO blocks, and those are, again, component blocks. They're just dummy blocks, but they indicate where something is. to help the player understand the final block shape, the big multi-block shape, where those points were, as well as when the multi-block is validated and swapped, where you have now invisible blocks in that same space. Well, that invisible block, I need to know what went there, right? And if something was a pipe interaction, I need to know that at that position, because when I place a pipe next to it and it looks at that block, it needs to know that it can connect to that. And that can be done with this IO block validation. Is how do you know, without calling, say, the block entity core, how do you know that that block can be interacted with? Now, there are other ways to approach this, and that is not to swap the blocks. Raccoon was working on a multi-block system where all of the blocks stay put, right? You build the structure out of blocks. Those blocks never change. It is the thing, right? That they never swap to make it look like a sleeker version of itself, like a pump jack, right? It's kind of the create way of doing things where you have, and it's very, very hard when you do it that way. It's very, very hard to animate, right? When you're just creating blocks, and in his case, he showed a boiler where you build this multi-block boiler, and you could fill it with coal and you could light it, and all of the stuff, right, is working. It's all based on blocks. So it's very blocky, of course. You're not swapping it with a cool looking boiler, or a single block that can be then animated. You're keeping it as the blocks. And that's another way of kind of solving this. And I'm opting for this way because I want to give players the ability, I want to give other modders as well, the ability to have uniquely designed and animated structures that are big, right, that are sleek, that don't need to conform to block-based sizes, right? Single block-based sizes. You can design a cooler, sleeker version of something that you build in block form that you then swap when it's finished. And that is what this interactable is. It's a special block. Now, remember, in immersive engineering, you'd have to smack a certain block in the build. You'd have to smack it with a hammer. And you never really knew what block to hit unless you built that structure over and over and over again. And you just memorized, like, oh, it's this block, right? Like, which block in the metal press do you smack, right? It was a certain block. It wasn't just any block. It was a certain block that you had to hit, and then that validated and it swapped the model. Well, rather than have this unknown block, like, oh, you just pick a block in this mix of blocks, you just pick one that's the one you smack. I actually have a special block that indicates this is the block you smack, like the interactable block. And that is the block that then tells the core, hey, validate, right? All it's doing is passing that message, hey, I got smacked with a wrench, right? Validate yourself, right? And it's also keeping track of like which layer that it's on and blah 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 blah, right? So the really, really big multi-blocks you're gonna have to build these in layers. I'm not really 100% sure how to detect a layer is done, other than just like the validation of the interactable block will go up to whatever current layer it is. If the layer validates, it does the next layer. So you're just gonna have to validate it layer to layer to layer to layer until it's finished. I don't know how in immersive engineering, as you're building the multi-block, I don't know how that it updated itself when you placed blocks. Right? Are there dummy blocks at those places that then pick up the fact that there's a block change event? I don't know. I don't really have any experience in how to solve this in the myriad of ways that they've done it in Minecraft. Because there are many, many, many ways to do this, and a lot of these features have evolved over years of development and many, many, many people contributing. And thus far, I'm really the only consistent one that contributes to this code base. I get people kind of coming in and swooping in and contributing something, and then whoop, they're never heard from again. Right? So they're not, they'll dive in, throw some code my way, and then off they go. And it's like, okay, well, it is what it is. If somebody had some experience in how to do this and wanted to contribute, I would welcome them with open arms. Because I'm having to kind of do the trial by fire, my own my own little way here. Okay. So the other thing with this validation is we're only looking at the level of us and down. We're never looking up to look for the core block, because the core of the multi-block is always the middle center of the whatever the multi-block is. It's just easier that way. Like, why would the core have to be some weird, obscure block in the middle of a multi-block, right? Why would you build core and then build down? You'd build the core, you place the core first. It's an incomplete core. You place that defines the multi-block. That just defines it. So there's really no reason why that needs to be anything other than the middle, basically the middle center, or it can be off center. If the multi-block is not an odd size, it doesn't have to be an odd size. Right? So if it's 2 by 2, it's, it would not be the center, but it would be on the bottom. Right? It would be one of the 4 blocks on the bottom. And depending on how you orient it, it's going to be built, it's just going to offset itself. So, what we're going to do is, we don't have anything to validate yet. Once I get into the actual code here, I'll be able to actually start iterating and testing and kind of grinding out some of the bugs. But I need a way. So the trigger validation, yeah, here's all the different IO block types. I tried to cover all the bases. So we have item, fluid, power, signal, gas, mechanical, and then the interaction type. And the interaction type is the special one, because it's not an input or output, it's just interaction. The other ones have input and output. So you can specify, hey, this is an output only, or input only. But for the cases of the actual variant of the block, it doesn't matter. It's input or output, whatever. The actual block itself, the block entity will control which ones are inputs and which ones are outputs. Those can be defined. All right. So a lot of this code I had to basically copy from the base multi-block, but I had to tweak it because the base multi-block code is limited in how big the multi-block can be. It's hard coded to a limit, to a size limit. And I was talking to Tyrone about this a month or two ago, and I was just like, yeah, this is, I don't know, like, I kind of was like, why did you code this to be limited in size? Like, I don't understand why it was done the way that it was done. And he didn't really know what I was talking about. And I had to explain to him how his own code worked. I was like, you're limiting in size your multi-blocks because of how the blocks are coded. They're limited in how many blocks are offset from the core. It's encoded in the block. You can't have a block over 5x5x6. Or 5x6x5, right? If you're doing XYZ. So 5x6x5. That's the extent. That's the biggest you can get it. In the base game. Because of how the blocks are encoded. And so my implementation, the reason why I had to come through and like reprogram all of this is to introduce, instead of encoding the offset in the block's code, I encode the offset in the block entity of every block. So rather than spark up 1,500 plus new block codes, which would not be good, because that's stupid, I just encode it in the block entity, and I have one dummy block, right? I have one block and one block entity, and that block entity exists for every block space, right, in the multi-block. Every block space that had a block in it. If it's air in the multi-block, it's going to be air. There's not going to be a dummy block there. But every block that comprises a multi-block will then have a dummy block and a block entity that points to the core, right? The principal. So every block in a multi-block will then have a block entity, and the block space there will have a block entity, and that will allow me then to customize, or at least try to customize the collision box, selection box, stuff like that, based on the position of that offset. So yeah, right now I think the collision box, they're basically default collision boxes. So so I just want to quickly run with this here and show that the tanks, before I forget, because I would have forgotten. It takes a while to load just because it's loading a bunch of debug stuff. Loading 7x7x8 spawn chunks. All right, so you see there's 70 liters of crude oil in there. I really should really change the collision box on that. Anyway, so you can see I have 5 buckets on me, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. now I have 5 buckets of crude oil. And I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I've got 5 buckets of empty. There you go. Now it works. And here's the barrel to kind of prove. Right? The same interaction between this and that, even though this uses a vastly different set of calls than this, but the functionality is the same. And yes, if you have water, you cannot put water in here, right? You can't then cheese that, basically. Like that. Okay. So, this is my test world. As you can see, all of the things for testing. I don't really know why I have a border of dirt around. I don't remember doing that. Why do I have a border of dirt around? Oh, maybe I had the oil spill. I seem to remember I had an oil spill at some point, but this poor world. Anyway, that is now working. So the bucket bug is fixed. So multi-block behavior. Let's see. I'm trying to remember where I left off. This is the problem of what I was working on when I stopped for the holidays, and then I'm like, all right, where was I again? I should have written a note to myself or something. Because yes, the highlight incomplete parts. So this is my custom multi-block structure, and I have a custom one because I also introduce a way of specifying the highlight colors based on the block numbers, as well as being able to set a custom highlight ID, which is important that each multi-block gets its own ID, because then the IDs are not going to crosstalk between one another. Because when you highlight blocks, you give it an ID of what the highlight is. And then I encode all the highlight colors also. Right, so I add some functionality to the if I open up code, open assets, vintage, blocks, multi-block, creosote oven. This is my test. So the block highlight colors are based on the W here is the block number, which is where this comes from. This block number. Okay, so this block number corresponds to this and corresponds to all of these. Right, and I'm able to specify a color for each number, as well as the highlight ID for the whole thing. So anytime you're building one of these, this is the highlight ID that it's being used. Now, I don't know if there's a more elegant solution to this, because what happens if you're building 2 of these? I would highly advise, anytime you're dealing with a feature like this, you just build one at a time. And this is not complete. Like I generated this. I generated this before I had the IO blocks. So I need to rebuild this and regenerate this code with the IO blocks, so I can actually specify the IO inside of here. But this multi-block structure is the main what's put out for the command, and the command is not reported right in the files, but it's /we space gmc. But you have to be looking at the core, and you have to have highlighted the actual multi-block itself. So there's a couple extra steps there instead of just running the command. But yeah, I should specify the actual multi-blocks, because we have now the dummy blocks and the IO. Well, it's the IO blocks. Yeah. So the IO blocks. Here's all the IO blocks. The interactable gets its own class, because this is the only one that like actually needs to communicate with things. All these other ones are just blocks, right? They're just like dirt. They're just blocks. They don't tick. They don't have any special functionality. And then they all have their own shapes for, decoration reasons. Okay. I don't have any recipes for any of these yet, because, this feature is not done. So there's no recipes for it yet. Once the feature is actually functional and working, then I'll go through, and recipes are like the last step. Believe it or not. You think like, ooh, recipes, that's the more interesting part. It's like, yeah, it is. Balance and recipes and all of that. It's literally the last thing I do for any of this stuff. I want to make sure the machine is in. I want to make sure it's working. I want to make sure it's as bug free as, if I can detect a bug, I try to fix it. So it's as bug free as I can find. Once all of that is done, then it's like, all right, what's the recipe to build this thing? It's the last step. Okay. So we need to possibly rebuild the multi-block itself, right? So the creosote oven, I wanna build this thing. Yeah, I want to build this thing with as feature complete as possible, so when I start testing it. So the creosote oven here, we have two different states, incomplete and built. And then eventually we'll have the entity, we'll have behaviors and all that. We'll have all that stuff in here. But behaviors here, this is a block behavior, not an entity behavior, because it's the block that is the multi-block. Entity behaviors is like what behaviors does the entity get, which this will be entity behaviors by type, and it'll have a built, and then there will be I'll need the power interface for this, so I can interact with power. So I need to fire this up again. I need to go blow my nose, and I definitely don't want to do that on camera. So I'm going to be right back. Okay. Squared again. So, let's see. I want to build this thing. Now, this here was the initial thing. So, there's your right there. Block MB creosote oven incomplete north. That is the core. Okay. Then what I want to do, and you always want to build these north, right? I'm looking north because that's the default. That's the default. So we want to specify IO around this. Right? Okay. We can take that out of my hand. I don't need that. Clogging up the gums. Okay. So, where do we want the IO? Because I'm pretty sure all those blocks are in here too. There we go. Multi-block component. Heavy engineering, light energy. Somewhere in here, I thought there would be item. What would that be called? There it is, multi-block IO. So let's just multi-block. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. These should all be pretty familiar. Okay. Now, there is no power in this block. Right? So there's no power in here. And I really wish you could, like, bookmark a search. Just be like, keep this search. Just save the search. So next time I open it. So we want items and fluids input and output in this block. So we're going to do VE multi-block IO. So we're going to do give block Vent engineering domain VE multi-block IO item. Let's give me 10 of these. And then fluid, give me 10 of those. Okay. And then I don't think we need anything, but we are going to need the interaction. Okay. I wish I could get rid of this cough. I apologize. Okay. So, again, defaulting it to north is what we're looking at. I want to indicate the interaction block is there, but I want to put that on last. Okay. So, this will be item. This one over here will be item. Okay. Fluid probably out the bottom rear. Okay. So now imagine you're building this on the ground and you're building this one layer at a time and boom 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 you're going up and you're having to place these IO blocks right? Item IO, blah, 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 right? So there's one more item IO I want in the top, like that. So it's kind of like, hey, feed in items on the top. You feed in like items, you feed in or out items in the sides, and then the fluid comes out the bottom, and then we could have one more item coming out the front, right? And then the interaction block, we're going to have, imagine this is on the ground again, and we're looking at it like this, right? This is kind of at eye level, kind of where we would be standing. So this, in the actual finished structure, this will be the opening that you see, right? This will be the indication of the thing. This will be the interaction. The center here is the interaction. That will be the interaction block, right? That'll be the one that you right click with the wrench to validate the whole thing. Now that the sun is going down, because I can't figure out in this game how to freaking like have it not be nighttime, and like I need a half and half survival creative, right? That's what I need in this game. Is I need it to be always day. I need to not have hunger, but I need to have survival aspects of it, right? Because I don't like creative mode. I don't test in creative mode. People who play in creative mode, who ask me questions about how machines operate in creative mode, it confuses me, because it's creative mode. You have an infinite number of things. You don't need machines making shit for you. It's creative mode. You just give yourself a stack of whatever it is. You don't need, like, I don't understand people that are like, hey, this machine doesn't work in creative mode. And it's like, why are you trying to use machines in creative mode? It's kind of defeats the purpose. So anyway, it's weird. Okay. I have still, I think, the wand. Yep. Okay. So, game mode 2, I think. And then WE is there, and I think, there we go. We want to do select tool. Oh my god. How do I go up? Okay, so that's selected. And then we go underneath and we do WEGMC like that. Okay. And then JSON code written to server main.log. Okay. So, open file. That would be under C, and then users, your username, app data, roaming, vintage story, logs, server main. And there's the multi-block structure. So we're going to copy this. We're going to go over to our thingy. And we're going to paste it here. And we're going to indent it. And for some reason, Tyrone, you need to block everything in quotes. It it upsets my sensibilities, especially trying to work in VS Code when it's like this is all like you can see the red over here. It's like this is all invalid JSON, right? Because these are not quoted. So I have to come in here and go X colon and then like that, replace all, and then go Y, replace, Z, replace, W, replace. There we go. Now, VS Code is like, hey, this is all valid JSON. And it's good to go. I don't know why. I mean, it would be trivial to update the code that exports just to be like, put quotes around it. That way you can just copy it into VS Code and be like, hey, it works. I just hit save. Do you have a edit all the JSON? Oh, Visual. Does it automatically reformat it for you? I guess I've never tried to edit JSON in Visual Studio. You know, Visual Studio was my code. I'm so behind the times. Okay, so you can see now what we can do here is we can go GM1, get out of creative mode. We're going to save and leave. Always save and leave gracefully if you can. Because reasons. So now we have a bunch more block numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the block highlight colors here is this is actually like a legit multi-block design, right? I finally have a multi-block design that I can then iterate and test on. It took a while because we had to get the multi-block IO block specified. We had to get the design for the actual the core. We had to get all of that stuff in, and then we can design the multi-block, and now we can work on validation and all of the things. And now we need to specify like coloration, and I don't really know minifies. What is minify? That's a new, I've never heard that word before. Minified. On the same line like that. Do you mean like these are all like on different lines? X, Y, Z, W are all on different lines? That would be annoying. Having all of that on different lines, because imagine how long that would be. That would be like pages and pages and pages and pages of just XYZW, XYZW, XYZW. It's like, nah, I like this. So it's minified, like it's they're combined, right? You have an element that's combined like that. Interesting. Same with this is the braces are that's one element. Okay, so we have now a few more 3, 4, 5, right? Five, and then so RGBA, the A is alpha. It is what it is. Like it would be nice to have in my back pocket a set of RGB values that that I just knew, but let's just say, okay, the 4 is the core. So we're going to make that like a white. So we're just going to say, hey, RGB is the same value, right? And then this is R, this is G. How about this gets 94, and then the B gets the 215. And then this one, the R and the G, just, I need a color. So red and green, I think makes yellow in RGB space. Red plus green is yellow. I think I'm not hip to the color theory in RGB space. I know my color wheel from like second grade. But this is all of the colors specified, and the core I'll just have, a white, a grayish white color. And you could also mess with the alpha on this. I'm not 100% sure what we want to do with that. Okay, so this now should be able to load properly as a multi-block structure. One of my custom multi-block structures, VE multi-block structure, because now we have all of the things specified. And this is just pulling in color from RGBA, and then the block highlight colors. We're specifying the W as the color. So anytime that block is set, it's going to add a special color for that W value. Okay. The key is the W. Transformed offsets. Okay, so what then is the block we need to specify? Let's look at JSON again. Block for the creosote oven. So the creosote oven block is it is a block, right? But we're going to need a custom entity for the block itself. And this is the next big part. We have multi-block core is an electric block. Okay. Multi-block core. Because the block core, I'm trying to think of like, if the block itself, not the block entity, if the block needs to change. I think the complete block needs to change. But I don't know if the object needs to change. It just needs to know whether it's complete or not. Because then the shape changes when it validates. The shape is going to swap. It's going to take all of the blocks that you built with, swap them all to dummy blocks, and then the core shape, which is normally an incomplete core, is just a block. Well, a complete core swaps to the big multi-block, and it's just whoop, it just swaps that shape, and it orients it depending on how you build it. So I'm trying to think of like why we would need unloaded. We don't have any wire nodes. It's technically the multi-blocks are going to need power like stuff, but they're not going to be directly wireable. They're going to use the connectors. Just like in immersive, you put the connector on there. And the connector is the interface between the power network and the multi-block. Which that code I haven't written yet either. It's one of the reasons why the first multi-block I'm working on doesn't use power. Because I want to get the multi-block working before I deal with the power system. I think the second multi-block will probably be the diesel generator or a fuel generator. We'll be able to burn, any number of things at first. Probably just put in crude oil or something and just burn that at a lower efficiency. Just to get, it'll be the second iteration. Once you get the multi-block working, it'll be the next thing to test, but then it'll be adding the electrical element to be able to interface to MV power. It'll be an MV generator. Expensive to build, the diesel generator is going to be a big beefy machine, but it'll produce 1,000 MV power per second. It'll be a pretty decent amount of power, but it'll be expensive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's look at block the MB core. Am I registering these register block classes? I am. Multi-block dummy. I'm registering the dummy block, the behavior. The interactable block. I'm not registering the core. Okay, so VEMB core. Do I need a special version of this? I don't think I do. Multi-blocks are not directly wire connectable, but will require a power connection block of the correct tier placed in the proper location on the multi-block. Now, I don't think I've specified I'm not specifying the tier of power. So what I think I'm thinking about here is the power connection block will be, again, just a very, very basic, hey, this is where power goes. But the tier itself is going to be defined by the multi-block itself. Or just like in the entity behaviors here of every other machine, there'll be a power interface that defines, hey, this is the tier of power. Okay. Close that. So when you place get power tier at man, connection index, enum power tier, power tiers, enum power tier, nodes of I power tier. Yeah. Wire nodes. So yeah, we're gonna need the same sort of infrastructure as like a base VE multi-block or a multi-block, like an LV, whatever. So if we look at this, what I'm looking at is this here. Because this is where the defined power tier is. It's not in the entity behavior. It's in the wire node. But the wire nodes themselves, you're not going to have the actual node specified, because it'll just be like 000 or whatever, because it'll be multi-blocks will not be directly connectable. And I could possibly make them connectable, but having the selection box outside of a single block space, right, is not really supported. And this is the limitation of the engine. And I've talked to Tyrone about this many, many, many times about like what is with the limit on the block, because any collision box, selection box outside of a block space, of a single block space, is not really supported, which is why all of my wire connection nodes are all inside of the block in the LV tier, right? They're all somewhere inside that block space, because I was told explicitly, like there is no support for that selection box outside of the block space. Right? Values greater than 1. The engine just doesn't like it. So, that's the limitation. And so when it comes to multi-blocks, well, now you've got, if you want to connect that wire to like a pump jack, well, that connection is going to be way outside of the single block space. Way, way out there. So it's like, yeah, I could specify a special wireable block, like a dummy, like an IO block that's wireable, and that block space, wherever you place it in the multi-block, could be specified. But that's a whole level of code, because you'd have to have a special version of that for every multi-block, or at least one defined for every multi-block. And that's kind of against the flavor of the multi-block system. Is there's no hard-coded blocks for every single multi-block. You have generic interactable blocks, generic power blocks, generic fluid and item IO blocks. All of that stuff you build a multi-block with. But in the end, the system can't be wireable, because the wire would have to go into the center of the block, and that just wouldn't look very well. It wouldn't look right. So yeah, this here, so the class here, then we need special to be the multi-block block, VEMB core. That. Okay. Now we have, let me close that so I'm not confused. So now the VEMB core, we have to register this block with the game. Otherwise, it's going to hit that, and it's going to hit that text and be like, what is this? I don't even know what this thing is. And I know I'm not doing it here. I just want to make sure I'm not crossing the streams. Don't cross the streams. Register blocks. Nope. Okay, good. So we go to multi-block mod, register classes. Blocks are first, so we're going to do api.register block class VEMB core, type of VEMB core. So this tells the game, hey, when you run into this text for a block, use this object, right? I'm sending it a type. Use this object for this class. And then when this thing is specified, right, when it runs into and it loads this, it sees this and goes, oh, I know what that is. Let's instantiate one of these instead of just a generic block. And then we're going to need a bunch of more code in here for like interaction, right? I think I made myself too much coffee today. I'm getting a little buzzed. It's been like a week and a half since I've had this much coffee, right? It's been a while because I was sick all last week. It was a rough week. So like I need to validate or trigger something because we have the behavior, right? VE multi-block behavior. We're able to get that. So this get behavior. So we want to do override on block interact start. So this, when a player right clicks while targeting this block, okay, should return true if the event is handled, right? If you return false, it's not synced with the server, right? So that's so the event fires on the client, and if you return true, boom, it's fired on the server, right? It's synced to the server. So you can do a client-side only call if you really wanted to, but you really don't, you really shouldn't ignore the server. The server should fire the event as well. But the server doesn't care about block highlights and stuff like that. It doesn't care about rendering stuff. You should still sync the data. You should still sync the call to the server, but the server, should ignore all that stuff. Okay, so this on block interact start. We want to do if by player does not equal null. and by player dot inventory manager dot active hotbar slot dot empty not okay. We're just doing some code in here just to validate some things and stuff. So if a player is the one interacting, which I don't know why this would trigger otherwise, and then the hotbar slot is not empty if item stack dot collectible dot tool equals wrench. Okay, so if it's a player that's holding something that's a tool, a wrench, right? If set enum tool, if I do that, it's a nullable, right? The little question mark right there. I don't know if you see that, but there's a little question mark after enum tool. Means it could be null. So if it is not null, we want to look at the wrench. If it is null, this if statement will fail anyway, right? If it's null. Okay, so multi-block dot trigger validation. World by player block selection block selection dot position. I shouldn't need that, but because I'm already selecting the block, but the core and the what this is triggering is if you're interacting with the core. The trigger validation can happen if you're interacting with God only knows what, right? The interactable block, right? So the selection and the position of the core in that case would be two different positions. So that's why I want to make sure I have all access. So with this trigger validation, this thing then jumps into the multi-block here, which should trigger the validation of the block. So let's just try to find where is the trigger validation call. Do I not have a trigger validation call? VE multi-block structure. Oh, that's a behavior. I was looking at the thing. Okay, trigger validation. There it is. So this wants the entity core, right, at the position of the core. So that means, oh, I have cat hair all over. We need to then make sure that the entity class is set to the core, right? Entity core. So let's look at the entity core and see if there's any traps or pitfalls in here. So the entity core is the thing that is tracking what active layer that we have. Because remember, when you're building this, what I'm trying to do is only highlight the blocks at whatever layer whatever layer you're working on in the moment. So as you validate, you're going up, and you can trigger validation either by right-clicking the core or by right-clicking the interactable block over and over and over again as you validate the thing going up. So it's just like you build a layer, and small multi-blocks, you'd be able to build it in one shot, right? You just memorize the pattern. But really big multi-blocks, like a big oil refinery, it's going to be a little bit harder to figure out, like, oh, which blocks do I need where, and it's going to be a lot more involved. So with that is just it's going to be, you're going to want to validate layer to layer to layer. Okay, so with the entity core here, what I want to do is we want to go to the mod block entities. We need MB entity core. So there's a couple things at work here that my brain is, I'm kind of in an infinite loop. The entity core is going to be the base class of all of the all the multi-blocks, right? You're not gonna out and out call the entity core. What you're gonna do is whatever entity class the creosote oven is itself is going to derive from the entity core for the multi-block, right? So that means the block entity of the creosote oven, which I've already done, right? This is actually what I need to refactor, because this is like the creosote oven. This is all the recipes. This is the validation. This is, the on tick. This is the temperature change. This is all the functionality of the creosote oven. And it's specified as a block entity openable container. So we go to here. This is the electric container. How do I want to do this? Electric container B. Electric container BE. What is this? So that is an openable container. Okay. So this is that. So I should be able to switch the base class of this. Instead of being that, I should be able to switch it to this. And not be too crazy here. The liquid interface is what it is. This is required because it's a liquid. There's liquid handling and stuff, which requires pipes and all of the gubbins. I'm gonna have to recode all of this anyway. Right, because again, we're taking a thing that was kind of temporary, the creosote oven, and I've told people this a few times that the creosote oven is not finished. It is not in its final state. And before like this goes out wide, I'm going to be telling people, if you have a creosote oven in your base, break it before you update, because this is not, it's not going to be the same object, right? So what was saved to disk before is going to be different. So you're going to want to break it, throw it into a box. The item itself shouldn't change too much, but the class that's associated with it is changing. And I have a comment in here. Oh, cool. Somebody's working on, I don't know, is that, I'm not sure if that's in-game or if that's just a website. If it's just a mock-up, I'm not sure. Okay. But yeah, this is going to change. So the base class here, copy, paste. Hides inherited member, client update delay. Wait, what? What? Electric container. Client update delay. Okay. Not sure why I had that specified twice. I did put I've done a bunch of work on streamlining and optimizing the update rate of the mod. So it spams, a lot less updates. Okay. So not much changed in the functionality, right? Because this object already has the base object, but what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, instead of being a normal block now, this is actually a multi-block, so we need to include a bunch of functionality with this block, with this entity, because now it's a multi-block. Now there's extra gubbin. There's validation, and there's an added layer with the multi-block entity core here, where I need to then grab the multi-block right? Since this is going to be the core block entity of multi-block machines, I want to be able to access the multi-block, which is just a behavior on the block, but it's still important to be able to like grab that behavior anywhere that I am in the mod. So we have that call on the block side, and we have that call on the block entity side, where we're able to interface with the multi-block structure. And the structure is just like the highlight colors, the design itself, the structure, like all of that stuff that's loaded. It doesn't change. You can have 50 of these in your base. It's the same object no matter what, but we still need access to it. Because when you like, if the multi-block, like the creosote oven is existing as a finished block, and you go to break the block, I need to be able to then pull that multi-block and say, we're in the process of breaking it. We need to inform all the things that we're breaking. Because that is that's a very, very, like, it's just stop everything you're doing because we're breaking the multi-block. Like it's going to be, you're going to need to drop whatever is inside of it. You're going to need to stop and clean up memory and all of that kind of stuff. So, anyway, so the creosote oven itself, I will have to update this as I iterate and sort of fix bugs and go through everything. Yeah, that'll be just take some time. So, first things first, we wanted to look at multi-block structure, which is behavior. So this is the important thing here. This is why I did all of that, because this call is saying, hey, I want to pull the core object because I pass in where the core is. I want to be like, hey, grab the core, because I need to know what the active layer is, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean the guides in the I mean they're not super verbose, of course. There are guides that I have in the handbook. And that, I'm super limited in the handbook. The handbook is like, like all of the text in the handbook. When you go to the handbook and you go to guides, right? There's vintage engineering guides in here, right? Vintage engineering start guide. LV goal. So all of this text, including links to like cross-reference things, all of this text is all on one line. The whole thing is on one line in the text file. So it's like really hard to do this, and I don't know of a way to like inject like images into this. I don't know if there's a way to do it, because like none of the base game has like text or images, right? So it's like very, very limited in what I can do. But there's like 5, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So there's 5 guides for vintage engineering already in the handbook, and that's a good place to start. Of course, it's not by any means like full like step by step hold your hand through all of the things, just because a lot of people like to experiment and discover things on their own, but you know, it kind of like the final boss of the LV tier is the blast furnace with powered blower on the left and right side. To make all this, you need at least 2 batches of steel using vanilla mechanics. So, and then with this, 2 power blowers, you make blister steel with an iron ingot and a piece of coal coke. One iron, the blast furnace requires iron and bloom. Without the blowers, with them, will craft. So, a lot of people that ask me questions, they're already answered in this. People who like, and the problem is people don't like reading. Like this has been in the mod for over a year. These guides, and all they need to do is people just sit and read this, right? Because it's like, how do you make steel? Well, it's right here. How to make steel. You can make iron, and you can make iron ingots if you have blowers, and you can make all alloys, and blah 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 blah. So it's like it's all in here, but people don't like reading, and they want they don't like actually working to figure something out. They want it like spoon fed. They want to here are the answers. Here's the it's the age of Google. Here are the very convenient answers for everything that you need. So it just is what it is. Whatever. So we're going to take this, we're going to put it there. Okay. And then we're going to go and we're going to say, hey, what happens just on a whim? What happens when I have a wrench in my hand, and I know I have a wrench somewhere in here. That's a wire tool. Hey, look at that. It's a wrench. And I right click it with a wrench. And I go here. And I do the collectible. And I do the tool. And I step in. And the multi-block core is null. Why is the multi-block core null? Why is that null? Oh, I think I know why. Yeah, I know why. Just call it once. You don't have to call it 6,000 times. The thing that I didn't do was specify in here what the entity class is. Okay, so this entity class then is the creosote oven. It's not the base object. The entity class has to be the creosote oven block itself. Right? This block is the core block, right? So so should we, as far as the entity class, have a different entity for when it is complete or when it is incomplete or built? Incomplete and built. Because the built is like the finished machine. All of the gubbins. Basically what this object is. This is the built final form. The incomplete is what's created. So I don't know what the best course of action here is, if we should have just the same block entity. I think we should. It would be a lot less messy, memory-wise, just to have the same block entity, regardless of what form it's in. And the multi-block itself knows whether it's built or not. The state of the block, right, is what the shape of it. So we have the incomplete and then the built. right? The built version is the finished, big, sweet-looking block. The incomplete version is the small little core. So that the handbook, getting back to what you were working on, the handbook hackiness is just really frustrating, which is why I really wanted Vise in his Rustbound Magic mod. He like coded his own guidebook, like entire guidebook with all sorts of features and functionality. And like I early on when I noticed that and people were telling me about this awesome guidebook, like I wrote like I commented and I was like, hey, is there any way to take whatever code you made in your guidebook to make that just a library and allow other people to make their own guidebooks, right? Similar like the Minecraft like Patchouli and all these other infrastructures that you use to make a book, like to be able to have like little images, to inject little images into it and have like cross references to the handbook and be able to do that, but mainly be able to format the text that it's printing in there in a way that's like little text files that got carriage returns and that you actually like, because having the entire entry on one line and trying to figure out like it's so annoying. So even like a little HTML like display thing in a handbook would be preferable to what the handbook is now. There just needs to be a project in like Tyrone and company just need to sit down and be like, let's reimagine the handbook because it's so bad. It's useful for little bits of looking up things, but it's horrible to try to add any good amount of like material to, like guides and help and stuff like that. It's just very hacky. And adding stuff to the handbook is also extremely hacky. Any mod that adds entries to existing items has to do it with hacks into like Harmony. There's no calls to add your own content to the handbook. So like the metal plate, to add a little line in there that specifies, hey, you can make metal plate with the metal press. That is a Harmony patch to hack into the handbook. And it's like, of all the things in the game not to allow you an easy way of just augmenting what's already there, you'd think that the base game help system would be one that would be like, hey, you just like an event is fired when you're looking at an object, and if you want to augment, right, the content in the handbook, you just add to the string builder object in the event, and it just adds it right to the handbook. You just include it. And I don't like. It would be nice. It's part of the like that was code that Blue Lightning did as far as like the handbook stuff. I've maintained it since then, but the handbook side was just like, oh my god. I didn't want to get into it at the time, and he just popped that code out in like a weekend. It was crazy. Yeah, the handbook is just the help text. In my opinion, like when you're looking up something, when you click on whatever it is, right? An event is fired behind the scenes that is just like handbook lookup, and you're given simple data. You're given the code of the item that somebody clicked on, and you're given a string builder object, like the player that clicked on it, the code of the thing they clicked on, and a string builder object, or whatever, or an object, whatever the object is, you're given that object, and then anything you add to that, right, string builder object, you can just add your own, flavor text in whatever format, and then you return that text to the event, and then the event just fires for all of the things that subscribe to it. And you can ignore codes that you don't care about. You just detect the code, and you're like, hey, if this code doesn't match, it is what it is. And then every one of my block entities, right, or every one of my blocks, creosote oven to the extruder to whatever, I could have a help. I have a vintage engineering help, whatever, that detects those objects like metal plate, all of that, and it's just augments, right? I just inject my own string builder into that object, and then the game just displays it. I don't know. That's that's an abstract of how kind of I think that feature could work. I don't know how to get little images to display in there, because when you actually look at a handbook, it's showing a little image of the metal press. And that's actually rendering a very small version of the metal press, right? It's actually rendering the 3D object, the shape. It's a very small version of the shape, but it's rendering that. There's no icon for the metal press. There's no like static icon that it's rendering in there. It's literally rendering a tiny little version of the shape. I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't know what that is. I would have to dig through Blue Lightning's code to find where that is, to figure out how the hell that game is rendering a tiny little shape and then adding text to it. I don't understand it. Can't even, let's see. I was talking to my wife. She mentioned that she just managed to get it. Ah. Yeah. The Vanilla Handbook is it's good for like people who already have a good grasp of the game. The game is a steep learning curve, right? And that is part of why people have a hard time getting into Vintage Story. Is it is brutal. It's a brutal survival game. Brutal. It's not, people in general, they think load in the game, punch a tree, build a build a crafting table and a chest, and it's like you have to be well into the game before you can build a chest. And you have to nap your own like knives, and you have to like, there is a way different early game to Vintage Story that throws people off, and they're used to the Minecraft startup where you punch a tree and you get an axe right away, and like you're into the game 20 minutes before you get an axe, right? You have to pick up sticks off the ground, and you have to nap an axe head, and you have to build an axe that way, and then the axe maybe lasts a tree, and then that axe is broken, then you need another one, and it's like, it is a brutally hard game to get started. Once you're doing it, though, it's very, very rewarding of a game to sort of get into, because it's like, it's just, it's way, way better. Okay, so the BE Creosote Oven, this is going to be, I know that I register this class, obviously, with the base game. So we look at the main mod, and we look at block entities. There it is. VE Creosote Oven. That is the text that I need to put in here. Now, when this thing is placed, it will instantiate properly the object. But I need to remove that first. We need to run the game because I have one of these built in my world. And if the change that I made, it's going to try to instantiate that object because it's placed. Well, there's no data on disk that it can load. So that would crash pretty hardcore because it's the wrong data. So I need to break it. Now there's no data there. There's no object. There's no data. Now we can save and leave. Now I can go back and then put that in, right? Now when I place the block, it's going to instantiate one of these objects. So I want to ensure that the creosote oven itself on player right click we need to grab if this dot block dot variant of what is the code for that state. If this dot block dot variant of state equals built. Well, let's do equals incomplete. Return true. Right? The block type the properties updated by the state it was incomplete. Because what this does is it opens the dialog, and I don't want to open the dialog if it's not complete. Right? So this should just ignore if I right click it. On block placed. And there's many, many, many places where I am going to have to probably determine this. Not sent for entities. Use entity.properties of variant. Okay. So, now with the multi-block structure, trigger validation, this should now not be null. Okay. I mean, this could crash horribly. I really wish I could get rid of this goddamn cough. So annoying. Doesn't help that I've been talking for the last 3 hours. Okay. Okay, so this, I'm just say a little prayer. And yes, that crashed hard. It did not like that at all. The behavior required format exception. What is okay? electric container, create behaviors. The electric behavior. Oh, right. Right. That entity behaviors. I need to look in LV creosote oven. So this is the creosote oven as it is in the game right now. Right? This is the creosote oven that's a multi-block. So they're two different things. The multi-block version and the crappy non-multi-block version. So entity behaviors, that is what I'm missing. It's saying, hey, I need the electric entity behavior. Even though this thing is not technically powered, right? Can extract power, it's false across the board. And I just want to look at my attributes here. Let's see. Allow held liquid transfer. Okay. That's fine. It was the electric container block entity was trying to initialize this entity behavior, and it was like, this entity behavior is not specified. Even though this block is one of the few doesn't need any power, like electricity, it still needs it. It still needs the behavior because it's just part of the base class. It doesn't need it. False. It doesn't need it. Can extract, can receive. It should be completely ignored in terms of like the electric networks and such. You're never going to be able to wire it in. So it doesn't need any wire nodes, anything like that right now. Like a diesel generator is going to need the behavior, but it's also going to need the wire nodes, where the wire node I'm going to need to use values like if they're just maybe all zeros or all negative ones or something like that. That will be a special case that if those values are -1, then just ignore it. It's not wireable. But it is. I do need the behavior. Okay. So now, now it should hopefully, maybe, possibly not crash. So let's try that again. And this is one of the reasons why, like, my test world usually has some pretty weird behavior, and I keep having to re-roll my test world because it's like, place a block, the system crashes, and it's like, oh shit, now God only knows what was saved there, but it shouldn't have saved anything because it crashed right away. Okay. So, hey, look at that. We're actually able to place it. And it's incomplete, right? So I'm right clicking on it and it's not pulling up the UI. It's an incomplete version of that. And so if I smack it with a wrench, this should trigger the validation step. There we go. Now we should actually see the core. There should be something there. Now you can see the core. Okay. Active layer is 0, which is right. Now, missing incomplete. Let's see. I just want to run this and see. God only knows what this is going to do. So missing is 8. So remember, it's looking at the layer 0, which is the layer of the, like, it's not offsetting the layer at all, which means the missing is 8, which is the 8 blocks around. So it is missing all of those blocks. And now it should highlight those blocks. And there they are. Right? I can't believe that worked. However, I might want to make the alpha is it morning or night? I think it's morning. Yeah, I think it's morning. Yeah. Because the coloration is not the best. Like, what color is this supposed to be versus like what this is supposed to be? Obviously, we're looking at this pattern. So this is a darker version than this. So oh, man. Well, I just want to build somewhere in here. There they are. So the front of this was item. The rear was fluid. And then we want to smack. Oh my god, that worked. That fucking worked. Okay. So, as you can see, I can't believe that worked. I'm a little proud of myself. That actually worked. So now this is the red block there, right? And that is the interactable block, and now we have the two on the sides are the items. Now the feature that I want in the final form of this is not like grayed or shaded blocks like this. The final form that I really want for this is like semi-transparent versions of this, right? That it actually looks like this, but semi-transparent. It's just like a shaded version of it, to indicate exactly what block goes there. But I don't know how to do that. I really don't know how to do that. You have to use like a weird mini dimension system. The same thing as like when you place a schematic with the world editor. The schematic is a ghosted version of the blocks that it's going to place. And that is a whole different like mini dimension system, and I don't really know how that works. So with this, like if we take the next layer, the problem is going to be, does the interactable block there and there and there and there and there. And these are item. And then this is going to be there. And now we put the interactable block there. So now the code that's called is going to be interactable. Or at least it should be. So we're going to go here and we're going to break this. Okay. And then we're going to hot reload. And then we're going to place it again. And then we crash. Collections modified. Oh. What? That shouldn't happen. Collection is modified. I don't modify the collection while I'm enumerating it. Walk blocks. It's saying I'm editing for each. It's this for each. Blocks to add. Add. Okay. I'm iterating through blocks to check. Blocks checked. Maybe it's this. Right? Because I'm in the middle of a for each and I clear, which is bad. You don't want to do that. What I should do, because it probably found the block, right? Because it's the core block was there. It probably found it. It was like, oh, I found it. Boom. And it just like tried to clear it. And it's like, oh, you cannot clear it in the middle of a for each. You cannot edit it. So what I should do is instead detect whether or not core position is set. Right? If core position is set, and I just want to verify this, bool found equals false. Okay. And then we want to do core position equals that. Blocks to add. Blocks checked. Where we're clear. We found it, so we don't need to add anymore. Blocks checked. I don't know. Yeah. We're going to do found equals true. We're going to come out here. Instead of doing a return, I want to break. Not break. Break. Why can't I break? Cannot control cannot leave the, okay, return then. Because I'm inside of a walk blocks, so this is an anonymous function inside of walk blocks, right? So it's an action. So that's why I can't do that. So return out of there, which returns out of the walk blocks, and then center order false, and then I come out here, if found, break. Okay. So I break, this break breaks me out of this for each. Now that I'm out of the for each, right, which is here, we clear blocks to add. We've already cleared that. Blocks checked. I want to not clear that. Blocks to add dot clear, because the blocks to add were already zero, because we clear that out. If we find it, we clear that out. So that'll be 0. Blocks to check. Blocks to add dot clear, and then we come up here. Blocks to check is already 0 because we clear it, and we've found it. So blocks checked is then cleared, and we've this should exit out completely, because we found it. And I did this Boolean just because I just want to make sure that we break out of it. We don't need to walk any more blocks. We don't need to do any more for eaches, right? We've already found it. We need to circuit it, so we're not checking blocks that we don't need to check because we found the damn thing. And if we haven't found it, then we have to do all of the things normally. Okay, so yes, now we should get out of that, and then core position, find MB core, trigger validation. We're not triggering the validation here, so we need to do another. Is this a block? This is a block entity. So the interactable block entity interactable. Oh. Block interactable. There it is. So this is entity controls.sneak. How about we keep the same functionality, where we have to smack it with a wrench, right, for consistency. Because if we have to smack the core with a wrench to start the validation, then it would make sense that the interactable block would have to be done the same way. Okay. So block interactable is, where is the code for that? Entity core? Block MB core. There it is. Multi-block core, block interactable is the same sort of function. Okay. And then we can take this out. No. Okay. Okay, so the block entity is then this, right? So the block gets the event, passes it to the block entity at that position, right? Which is itself, triggers the validation from the behavior, which I shouldn't have to do this because reasons. Wait. MB interactable is, yeah, I will have to do it. So this grabs this, passes the trigger validation onto the behavior, which is where it needs to be. Okay. So it's kind of like we're duplicating the interactable block because, again, the core is kind of getting buried in the multi-block and will be buried in most of them. So we need that interactable block as a secondary thing that you interact with to then be able to build the thing, right? So this is passing on the interactable, the trigger, the validation trigger kind of down the pipe to the core, which then pulls the multi-block structure object itself and validates from that. In the same way, we're looking at a wrench, and this is any wrench, right? If another mod defines a wrench, it's just a enum, it's just a JSON tag, like tool type equals wrench. Like it's just whatever the wrench is, it doesn't matter. Like the tools, the actual tools, I had him put a bunch more in here, right? Like literally, I just was like, hey, let's just add a bunch of tools in here. So I think I had him do probe, meter, drill, and then he's added even more. Firearm, crossbow, javelin, pike, shield, club, mace, warhammer, all these different like things, staff. So I'm sure other modders have like, hey, can you add these tools? All these different tool types. So a couple of these were ones that I've suggested that he added because it's difficult to add an enum after the fact. Like you can't like harmony patch new enumerations. They're kind of compiled into the code when you compile it. So it's like adding one after the fact is a lot harder. So like the drill and all that are just different tool types. I thought, hey, these are archetypes, but we're just whatever. It's a wrench, generic wrench. Okay, so let's start her back up. Okay, so I want to validate, right? Oink. Oh, I need the wrench. Oink. There we go. So that is a block. And then that is a block. And then, where's my structure? Behavior. Okay. So, in a perfect world, when I right-click this block with the wrench, it should pop the next one up. No? Why for art thou not doing that? Block interactable. It maybe is my object. Am I not registering that block? Okay, let's take those two out. And let's check my JSON here. Multi-block IO. MB interactable. Okay, so it's because the block. Okay. MB interactable. So it should be doing this. Find MB core. I'm not grabbing the right click here though. Okay. Which kind of tells me I'm not. Do I need the block interactable? Do I need this? Or can I get away with just this? Because I'm not, I've got a custom entity class, but the block class is generic. So if I do override on right on on block placed, on block removed. So this object, the block entity here, is not getting the event. Right? It's not getting the event. So this block interactable because the block entity inherently doesn't really get events. It's the block you're interacting with. It's a generic block. And then the block gets the position of what you're interacting with, because every instance of that block gets the same, right? It's the same function. So like every dirt block in the game is the same block. And when you right click that block, the event it's the same code, but it's getting which position. Right? The block selection object has the position of your interaction. And it's that position that you can then grab any entities associated with it. So you go from like the super generic down to the specific. You don't start specific. You start with the generic and you drill down into the specific. So this I am going to need to specify class by type. Okay. And then we're going to have to do that. And we're going to have to format this star block. And then star dash interaction is class by type. So this, then I need to specify block interactable, and I need to register this. So we need to go to VE multi-block mod. We already are. That's a block entity though. We're not registering the block. So we need to actually register this block with the mod. Somewhere in here, multi-block mod. So we need to do api.register block class VE multi-block interactable type of block interactable. Okay, so this is the code here that we use in here. So this is going to instantiate a custom block class when we place the interactable block, right? Which should instantiate this and say, hey, we are ready to interact with it, which I shouldn't need that then. And then we will, it's obviously going to instantiate the block entity already, because we already specify that. We don't specify an entity for any of the other variants, just our interaction, because the variants don't need an entity. Now, someone references and says, hey, I want item IO to actually have an inventory, like the actual blocks having an inventory, then you would have to have specified separate entity classes for each thing that you want to have unique items. You have to have an entity class. So this interactable block, then, the reason why we need a custom entity for it is it saves the core position, right? It encodes the core position once it finds it, and it kind of caches that. So next time it loads from disk, if it's an unfinished multi-block, it doesn't have to re-find the core position. It already has it. Right? If core position does not equal null. If core position is set, which it will be, if it loads it from disk, that from tree attributes is called before this initialize, if it's loading off of disk. So that core position is initialized, which means it's not null. It loads it off of disk. Therefore, we don't need to go out and find it again and do all the spidering and figure all of that out. So it just loads it up and it's ready to go. And you right click it again, and boom, you've got it. Revalidates it. And I could force a revalidation right away. That way, it highlights everything. But I want to limit the amount of gubbins that I'm doing until the system works. And does so reliably with no memory leaks. That's important. It's very, very easy to leak memory when you've got highlights, block highlights. You have to clean those up. Okay, so the VE MB interactable. Most everything is got VE in it. Obviously, I'm not universal. There's MB, BE, interactable. I try to limit the amount of freaking acronyms I put in here. Could you imagine? VE, MB, BE, interactable. That would be like, what is going on? Anyway. So, I mean, I could do that. I guess it's kind of behind the scenes. You wouldn't really call that explicitly, but whatever. Okay, so this, we should now theoretically be able to validate this with that interactable block. But you notice when I tested it last time, it did not crash. So that clear function is that's what was doing it. I was trying to clear a list while I was iterating through said list, and the game is like, nope, don't do that. That's bad. So you put the block there, put the interactable block there, and then nope. Why is it not? What am I missing? Why am I not getting? What? Am I not? What? Did I put those backwards? Okay. break and break again. Save and leave. I might have put those tags backwards. Let's try that. One more time. Well, yeah, I feel like the hard aspect of the game, but when we got to the ore prospecting, like the ore, yeah, that's a very common. That's the first mod I did was the ores aplenty mod. Yeah, for that very reason. it's and the rock sniffer mod as well. Like, okay, so now we have, yeah, it was just the order of operations. You have to be specific and then generic, not generic and then specific. So it is what it is. Okay, so we should be detecting that. We should be seeing the block entity, and we should be able to then run that, which is not validating. Why are you not validating properly? Trigger validation. Which then comes in here. Trigger validation. So let's look at this. Core position. It is definitely there. It is not finding the block entity. It's not finding the behavior. This. Why is it not finding that? I wonder if BE creosote oven. Behaviors. Oh! It's a block behavior, not a block entity behavior. So let's try that again. Bingo. That worked. Okay. I have to eat again because I'm always... I need a flat... I need some way of turning fucking eating off when in my test worlds. So if we just build that and then smack it again, boink, that goes up. And then we want to... Obviously, I need some more of these bricks, because reasons. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Okay. So then we have the bricks going out the outside. And then we have item in the middle. This should validate the thing. Layer, max Y, clear highlights, it's built, good to go. It is done. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything, but it's built. It validated the whole thing. Right? And if we remove a piece and we trigger it, boom, it highlights it. It says, hey, there's a thing missing right here. Right? There's a piece missing. And we place that, smack it, highlight goes away, it's ready to go. Exited with code 0, that's good. That means there's no memory leaks. That's always a positive. So, one of the things we can do here, because this is on the client side, right? When it validates, what we can do, because we know that we're on the client, because the client is where the highlights are all, like, the server does not care about highlights, right? They're only done on the client. The validation is done on the server. But on the client side, what we can do here is we can do basically world dot player, let's see, current, let's see, this is let's do by player dot chat. How do I send a chat message? Dot chat text. I know there's a way to do it. Entity dot chat. I know there's a way to do it. I don't do it in, like, there are parts of the API that I don't use enough to have memorized, like, exactly like the code, the command to do it. I know there's a way on the client side to spit a text message out. I've done it in myriad of places. But I want to send, like, multi-block completed or something like that. Just like, oh, hey, look at this. It's actually working. World dot API dot send dot client dot send world dot API chat commands dot send no, I don't want to. I'm not setting chat commands. Dot. God, I can't remember what it is. Event, maybe? I'm going to have to look at... Let's see, what... Send a chat message. This is what I want. Yeah. So this is part of the core client API. Which if we're on the side of the client, then that's obviously... So we're going to do API as... No, fuck. API... world.api as iCore client. Core client API dot send chat message. Multi-block completed. That's one way to do it. So I know world.side is client, so I know that the world.api is the core client API because we're already on the client. So the multi-block completed, just whatever, and then I can change this to a localized string, at some point. But that should spit out in the text when the multi-block is completed. It should spit that out and say, "Hey, the multi-block is completed." And then there is a huge amount of stuff to do. Once that is completed, right? It's valid. It's finished. Everything is working. So if we break a block and then validate, it's saying, "Hey, it's not valid." Finishing it, valid, boink, boom, multi-block completed. Right? And it would, every time you smack it, it's the same call. Right? So it's validating the whole thing. Because if I break this block and try to validate, it's saying, "Hey, it's not completed." And if I break one over here, it won't highlight this one. Oh, it will highlight that one. Interesting. Interesting. It should not have highlighted that if this one is invalid. But if we do that, smack it, we do that, and we smack it, boom, multi-block completed. Right? And once that's completed, that's when it will blah. It'll just swap the blocks. And that's going to be a massive thing. It's going to be there's going to be a huge amount of stuff. But that at the very least is working and valid, and it's validating all the things, right? And if we put the wrong block in here and we try to validate, it highlights the block and says, hey, this block is wrong, right? This block is wrong. It's red. And then, boop, multi-block completed. So, once it's completed, right, this process, we're going to do an else server stuff once completed. This is where, like, it's just all the things happen. It's going to swap. It's going to have to iterate through and swap all those blocks to the dummy blocks and get all the encoding and all of that stuff. It's going to be a nightmare of things and stuff. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff in here, and I'm going to have to, like, really think about the best way of doing this, because it's going to be a huge amount, because we not only have to swap all of the dummy blocks, right, around, we also have to swap ourself to the variant, right? We have to exchange our block to the variant of the finished block, and that's the tough part, is going to be that swap. So, yeah, fun times. There's a bit of work left in order to make that happen. I'm hopeful that it's not going to be too nasty. The fact that we've got it validating, I'm going to have to double check on my validation. I think my layer situation is a little busted. And that's why it highlighted all of the blocks. When I broke the block on the bottom and I broke the block halfway up, it highlighted both because my active layer was at the top because it had previously validated. So I think that I'm just going to have to, in the validation, the active layer, I'm not sure how, like, the incomplete block count, I'm going to have to, I don't know, I'm going to have to figure out how to do the layer. I'm not going to worry about it right now, because once you've finished it, and you break, and if you go in and break blocks after you finish it, it's gonna swap it out anyway. Once it's finished and the layer it's complete, right? It's not gonna stay a completed multi-block. It's gonna swap all those blocks anyway. So if you go in and you break a block, it's gonna have to swap it back. Right? You're breaking the multi-block. It has to swap all those blocks back. So theoretically, that should never really happen. As you're building it layer by layer. It should be fine. And then down the road, if somebody else at some point wants to, enhance the multi-block rendering with the little mini dimension shaded versions, or God forbid they make that system easier to fucking work with. They don't make it such a nightmare to have a little shaded block at a position with an alpha. Like, you're just rendering the block, but it's got an transparency with it. I don't know enough about the rendering side, right? And this is where the fanciness of the mod would really help somebody coming in and going, oh, I know how to make shit fancy. And that would be a huge boon to the mod, is making stuff fancy. Yeah, the reason why this creosote oven multi-block was the first was because it was so simple, right? It's a really simple multi-block, 3x3x4, solid. Like it's a really easy multi-block to start with and test. It was always the intention is this is the first multi-block, which is why it's the only thing in the mod that looked bigger than one block. Is this was always the intention. Once this system works, and this is what I'm testing it with, and all the swapping and all of that, very, very simple, very controlled. Once that works, then the sky's the limit. Then it's nuclear reactors, diesel generators, refineries. You just specify you can specify multi-blocks of any arbitrary size, and you just define, just like I did when I defined the recipe for the multi-block. I did that on camera for a reason. Anybody who was watching at that point, it is in the stream at some point. I don't know what the timestamp is, but you build the multi-block with the core, with all of the components, right? You define that, you in the world editor, you highlight the zone, the beginning and end, the bounding box, if you will, of the multi-block. It ignores air, but you select the bounding box, and then while you're looking at the core, which is the bottom center middle block, it's the core. While you're looking at that, you run the command, and it outputs this. Right here, the multi-block structure. It outputs this format, and that is essentially your recipe. That is your schematic for the multi-block, and then I add my own flavor structure items to this to specify highlight colors and the highlight ID of the multi-block, which is the next one I do is going to be 56 and then 57 and then 58. You want a different highlight ID for each multi-block variant. It's kind of arbitrary what ID you use, but the base game just uses 23, I think, and it's just everything is highlighted on 23. I don't know why. But this specifically, I wanted to expose the ability to do this. So you as a modder, if you come back and you want to define your own multi-blocks, you could be like, well, all my multi-blocks are going to be in the 200s, right? 201, 202, 203. Another modder could be 300, and then 400, and then 5. It doesn't matter. They're integers. Like you could have 9 billion if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but you could do that. And then the ID is just like the game is just highlighting that using that ID. That way they're separate. You could have somebody building a creosote oven and somebody building a diesel generator, and those IDs are different, right? And so it's not gonna do that. It's not gonna show. There's not gonna be any crosstalk between the different IDs. But yeah, this is the schematic, right? Ignoring air. It's a schematic. So you can imagine an oil refinery, if it's like 9x9x16, it's going to be a massive amount of blocks specified, right? The offsets here is going to be huge. There's going to be a huge amount of offsets. But the multi-block itself is going to be like just a finite number of blocks. You're going to have your normal like steel scaffolding, your steel platform, heavy machine block, stuff like that. This is where the cost of the multi-block comes in. This is where the resource cost is crafting the blocks to build the giant structure, the obscene amount of steel that you're going to need for like an oil refinery. You're going to need a huge amount of material for that. And once it's built, then it's going to swap when you build it. And it's going to be a single object that can have its own animations, but it's going to swap all those blocks to dummy blocks that have just collision and stuff. So, it's going to be basic at first. The first step is getting it working, right? And anybody who gets the very first version of this in their game that's working, that complains about some feature that it doesn't have, I am just going to ignore, because the feature itself is the complex part. The bells and whistles and all the stuff that people think is just like, oh, why doesn't it do this, is immensely complex amount of code that it takes to do things. Like having a part of the multi-block that's a ladder that you can then go up, if it's a big like cooling tower or something, and there's a ladder integrated into the side and you're able to go up it. It's like all of that's later. That's way later down the road. That is a bell and whistle that isn't needed for its use and its functionality. That is something that is, that's fun to have. Very few people are going to actually need it or use it. That's down the road. Getting it working and getting it functional and getting it useful, that is my number one priority. And so this system now is about, I don't know if it's halfway there. It's a large part. Getting the multi-block validatable, as from the core to the interactable block. That is a huge step. That we got it actually to be buildable and valid and to be valid. The highlight colors and all of that, I don't know how to make that look good, because it's like there was just like generic gray blocks, and I think I'm gonna have to play with the alpha channel maybe, or reduce the make the coloration more extreme, because they just like, even the blue gray blocks here did not look reddish to me. They didn't look red. So I'm not sure if the highlight colors themselves are working, or if it was just the alpha channel that was washing all the colors out. But I do have, like, they should be, the coloration of them, the highlights, it should be setting those init highlight colors, right? These are being set. Highlight incomplete parts. I am passing in, colors.add highlight. I'm passing in the highlight. Colors.add block highlight colors of offset of W. So this is passing in the highlighted color. In the base game, this is just hard-coded. It's literally hard-coded. So every block is highlighted the same color. And then air blocks are largely ignored. I don't know what is going on here. This is, I don't even want to know. It should ignore air blocks. It really should. Search blocks. Get color. Yeah. Like if block ID equals 0, I don't know. Somebody who's better can kind of go through this code and be like, I think this is where it's wrong, or whatever. Because like there are so many aspects of this mod that I could spend months just studying that one aspect and try to make it the best that it can be. But there are 5 other things, 5 other main systems in this mod that need that attention, right? You have the electrical system, you have the wiring system, you have the pipes, you have you have the rendering like subsystem. Like, there are a lot of aspects of this mod that could use individual attention and somebody's expertise in a specific field to kind of make it best, make it better. And I don't have the time, the months and months that it would take to just sit and pick this apart and try to figure out how this all works to make it as the best it can be. Same with the mini dimension system. I would love, instead of highlighting these parts, to somehow build a mini dimension system that highlights the block positions with the actual shaded version of the blocks. That's the end game of this feature. That's what I want to have. That has always been my intention, but I have not gotten into that feature in the game at all, right? I have not studied that at all, which I would have to. I would have to do like world edit. I don't even know where that would be. Like, Tyrone was like, yeah, the world editor does that. And it's like, yes, but where? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of objects in this game. I don't know what to look at. Like, what is my injection point? Where is my starting base to look at this feature to see where the mini dimension system is? Where is my starting point? Like, the mini dimension is got like there's an interface for it, right? There's mini dimension. Okay, so it's like, where is all of this current position and blah 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 blah. I'm not 100% sure, like, how to how to build one of these to get what I want. And somebody could just sit and grind away and just figure out this whole system and be like, oh, this is exactly what you do. And this is how you instantiate it. This is how you set what blocks are in the positions. How do you center it on the block? All of that kind of stuff, right? Because you center it on the core. You got the block types from the schematic. Like, I could integrate this into the multi-block structure, but I need to know like how to define that to create a little mini dimension. But anyway, that's once this system works, and then we need to make it pretty and make it better. Then we can work on that. But yeah, for now, I am going to leave it here. I want to thank everybody for coming by today. And any and all people who are supporting the project and supporting the channel in some way, I thank you all very much. And if you'd like to support the project or the channel in general, please consider being a patron, or at least a channel member, and helping pay the bills around here. Everybody has bills, and this project is a huge amount of work. And then, I mod a bunch of games, and if you have mods from other games that you want updated, that you don't really know how to update them, I can look at those, but any support gets priority. So I need to work on trying to monetize the 30 years of experience I have in programming and modding games. So this is where we're at. So I can do commissions. I'm gonna shoot for a roughly $10 an hour commission. However many hours realistically that it might take for any given mod or feature. But anyway, that's going to be it for today. I want to thank you all for coming by. On Saturday, we're going to just chill and relax. Patrons and members, I do a little side stream or side games with patrons and members. And this week is going to be some Star Rupture on Saturday. We've already got a Star Rupture game going. We're well into it by now. And it's just, it's the new thing. And next week might be a different new thing. And anybody who knows what that new thing is, kudos, but it is what it is. So Vintage Engineering is still my main, I really want to get this project and this thing off the ground. I know a lot of people are enjoying this mod, and this new feature for multi-blocks is going to just push this into the next realm. It's going to be just phenomenal. I don't know how yet to approach, how do you help somebody with understanding how to build a structure? I'm not really sure how to approach that yet, but in the end, I'm hoping this feature, works out. So anyway, I want to thank you all for coming by and hope to see everybody back here on Saturday for a little Star Rupture action. So yeah, see you then.